Hi, Marissa.
Hello.
Hey, I'm sorry I've got a little bit of sore throat. It's my
No,
week. So we got two people whose ability to speak is limited, Jeannie and me today.
that's terrible. You're among the most prolific of the speakers,
Yes.
usually.
So you will have to
That's
speak. I told
oh boy.
Jeannie was worried, so she sent me the email. Then she followed up with a text. Did you see my email? We won't said, don't worry, as long I know that you are a very good ventriloquist. So it will that Marissa is speaking, but it's going to be just you.
Awesome. Yep, nope, I got it. I'm gonna put it up now. I do have a presentation for today, so that's good. Um uh yeah, I hope, yeah, I don't know. I hope it's a good presentation. So
Yeah.
I'm
What I
doing another triangulating three thing.
Oh, nice, nice. I really like that format very much. I think it just works beautifully.
Yeah, I do. I like it. I do like it uh a lot. Yeah, so I'm time. The only thing is I don't have a lot of time. I'm not gonna lie, today's topics are not things I'm familiar about. So
Mhm.
they're kind of a little bit more general, and I'm hoping somebody in the audience knows more about them.
Yep, yep. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
So Maritza, I'm very excited about these meetups I'm doing with Hunter. They have some potential. So
Ooh, I downloaded the first one that I saw you have one on YouTube. I
yep,
haven't watched it yet, but I downloaded it to watch it.
okay. We are the really the launch of it is going to be on Friday. So the
This
first few
Friday?
kind of this Friday.
Oh, I
So
might
then if we
do
can make it. I'm trying to publicize it to a larger group of people. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make it because usually I'm doing homework that day, but or that night. But this is the last week of class, so I think I just might.
Yeah, if you because I mean basically it is the same idea as
Mhm.
comprehensivism, it
Oh,
just
I want to see. I'm curious.
yeah, clothed in slightly different concepts. So it is that's quite
I'm gonna
interesting.
put it on my I'm gonna put it on my calendar now. And barring some problem with my teammate on
Hmm.
our paper, I will be there because I think I can do some mistake. And then I'm gonna miss one of the comprehensivist Wednesday events because I will be in flight
Okay.
and I can't. So the 15th, that is what's that? What's today? Today is the 17th. So then it's 1 and 3. So I'm gonna miss rethinking change and evolution. Is Genesis ongoing? Oh
Okay.
man. I mean, missing any of them sucks. But um, wait, will I be back for this one? Am I in air? No, I'll be back for this one. Okay, perfect.
So
All right, so I'm
Maritza,
gonna miss that
one
one. Hmm?
more I did talk to Mike Morley, or not Mike Morley, Mike Amori.
Yes.
And it was a very good conversation. I spent about an hour talking to him. Very, very
Mm,
friendly, very, very good conversation. It's just that he's completely swamped because he's
I
both
figured.
like his chess business and his improv business has taken off. So
There's an improv business now. Wow.
he teaches improv to
I didn't realize he teached because I know that he was in improv classes himself. I didn't realize he teached. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So that was good. Um,
Very cool. That's
Hi
exciting.
Jimmy. I know you can't speak. I also can't speak too well today.
No, two
So
sickies. Hi, Jeannie.
but we don't know whether you can speak because you're on mute.
Oh,
Hi Ginny, you're still not unmuted.
So this is my voice.
Hi.
All right. I'm sorry to hear that. My voice is worse than yours, I have to say.
Worse?
You guys sound the same to me. Two
Yeah.
sickies. Oh,
Well, it's reassuring to know that it might be just an illness rather than a permanent condition.
Yeah. It's yeah, these colds are going around quite a bit. So
Well, I've been doing everything right, drinking a lot of juice, and I don't feel too bad.
Mhm.
So
So Maritza, I also will be interrupted with a very short call or something in the middle. So how about you take the lead in doing the discussion instead of
no
having
worries.
in there? So it's better. And I will try to speak as much as I can. Now you can hear me all right,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, you sound okay. Yeah, you sound fine. I can hear that you breaking because of being sick, but we can hear you.
Yeah. All right. I like the headquarters, collaborating comprehensivity headquarters. Very nice. And
Oh, wait.
you know what? Jeannie, you need to send me pictures. You need to send me pictures of all these books.
I I
That's
Up.
I sent you one, but I'll take. Actually, I might be having a problem because of MMS. I don't get MMS for
What?
some reason.
she's talking about text messaging.
Oh, you don't
Yeah,
text message. You can send it by email.
yeah, I know. But then I have to change it from the phone into the computer.
Uh,
I'll try. I will though. I
okay.
will. I'll do a few.
And you can be creative. You know, you're a visual artist after all, and that's why given you all of those books to start with, so you can
That's
play.
the reason.
Yeah, you can play around and see, and then we can show all kinds of configurations. You know, the tetrahedron shaped books. A tetrahedron built out of CJ's books. Now this one. So,
Oh God.
Do you hear a loud dog in my background? She can't.
nope, nope.
Oh,
Zoom is
good.
very good in,
Oh, good.
in- you know, I wish there was other ways of kind of keeping the dogs from barking. Zoom manages to keep them from barking.
It's amazing. No, this is a little yappy dog and he's outside. And so only me being annoyed. That's good.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to start letting in people.
Okay. I'm gonna grab my coffee so we can be oh gosh, it's 8 already. Yes. I'm gonna grab my coffee. I'll be right back.
Okay. So, Jeannie, what do you think of the idea of you doing the presentation for BFI?
Oh yeah. So I started reading it. It was so complicated. I couldn't tell what was going on, but it's on the 26th, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, all what I recommend is a very simple format to say, look, this is the story of the book if you want first, and then these are all the chapters, and you just go through the chapters, talk about like 3, 4 sentences about each of them, and that's it.
Would
Uh,
it be would it be in person or over
I,
computer?
I don't know. Just a second here. Hold on. My mistake. Hold on. I'm okay. Just a second. I made a mistake here. Okay, unlock the meeting. I clicked on the wrong one. Okay. All right. I think it is not in person. I think it is online as best as I can tell.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah.
We plotting?
For 26.
Hi, Bob. Where are you calling from?
Hi, Shrikant. Upstate New York.
Ah, okay. I know you. This Bob. There is another Bob, facilitator Bob. I don't.
Two Bobs. Okay.
Like we know you.
I'll change my name.
No, that's fine. I'll change the other name.
Facilitator?
Yeah, I'm gonna just make it.
There's
Okay.
a couple names that I don't recognize.
Yep. So Todd, where are you calling from?
Hello, I'm calling from New York City, Manhattan.
Wonderful, wonderful. Is
Thank
this your
you.
first time here?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And Leonid, what about you? Leonid, you're on mute. So it's 8:03, so we'll start in a couple of minutes. I'm going to make this the speaker view. Okay, I'm going to mute everybody for now. All right, folks, welcome. So Maritza, would you like to get us started?
Yes, I can. So welcome everyone to 52 Living Ideas. Today is Comprehensivist Wednesdays. Today we are continuing our path through CJ's book. The topic for today is the inductive attitude, a moral basis for science and comprehensivism. What we're going to do today, the format is in the beginning, we're going to invite you to share your thoughts on this essay. You can take about 2 minutes and just share what did you get out of reading this essay and or watching the previous meetup on this. And so the way that we queue here in 52 Living Ideas is you type an exclamation mark in the chat box, and we'll call on you in the order that we see your exclamation mark. We do ask you to be concise and brief, if at all possible, but do feel free to share your thoughts, whether they're in agreement or disagreement, as long as you do so respectfully. So we're going to start with talking about what you got out of the essay. And then after that, we'll invite anyone who would like to share a presentation that is similarly veined in the theme of this essay to share an essay with you. Here at 52 Living Ideas, we believe that the best way to learn is to teach. So that's why we invite everyone to provide a presentation. About 5 minutes is what we ask you to keep to. You're not required to tell us beforehand. So if you do have one, just type presentation in the chat box and we'll go ahead and call on you for that. That'll come later though. For starters, we're going to begin with talking about our takeaways from the essay. I'm going to start first up here with Jeannie. Welcome, Jeannie. Jeannie, you do have to unmute.
Sorry. CJ talked about experience being the basis of all thinking for Bucky Fuller and for himself. And I thought it was a little extreme. Bucky Fuller, number one, was partially deaf and quite nearsighted, so partially blind as well. And I think for a child that has those kinds of handicaps, you know, your experience is very different. I think for most of us, a lot of our experience comes from other people telling us what to do. I mean, you're born and somebody starts telling you what to do. And even objects won't tell you what to do. I was going to show this, if I can put it up to the camera. Lift tab, or pull back, whatever. Lift ring and pull back. And I was looking actually for the jars. It used to say twist, you know, and they'd show you the arrow. But even objects tell us what to do. And if we try to defy that, you know, the lid won't come off, or else, you know, you'll end up with the whole thing breaking open. So I think a lot of our experiences are sort of dictated by the things that we're told to do. And something like, you know, if my mother says, do not stick the bobby pin into the electric outlet, I never did. I was always intrigued and wanted to, but I kept myself back. And was it the experience of knowing that if I did what my mother told me not to, she'd be angry? Or, I mean, how do we determine this as experience? I never had to experience that. And hopefully not too many people will have to, in order to be convinced that sticking a bobby pin in there is a dangerous, you know, thing to do.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeannie. And next up, I have Shrikant. Go ahead, Shrikant.
Yeah, I find this essay to be really, really interesting. And there are a couple of things. I mean, I think I like the way in which he puts it. And firstly, it is based on Polya's work. I have a lot of regard for Polya. I really like his book, How to Solve It. That's the one that I've read. So his idea that we make conjectures and then we have to systematically test them. And we can't get, you know, we just can't fall in love with your conjectures. You need to have kind of intellectual courage to go against whatever it is that you held. You need the intellectual honesty to say, does it contradict or not contradict? And you need that continuous kind of humility of kind of taking things in, you know, kind of remaining open to everything. So I really like the whole system. The thing that I'm most curious about is that CJ mentions in the essay that he did some 28 meetups on 102 pages of this book for the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. I'm a little jealous and would like to hear from people who attended some of those meetups what went on during those meetups, because that would be materially making this presentation richer. So that's all I had. To you, Maritza.
I think actually they were done with the math his math group and not with Thinking Society. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeannie, but I believe Polya he explored Polya through math, not through philosophy, which is interesting, right? Um, if if I see someone who I know was in the math group, I'll call on them. Oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
I see I'm not even muted, but actually CJ insisted on doing all of the problems. He never let a problem go. And it was that kind of thing because the two of us worked on Coxeter for many, many years, and he never would skip a problem. And there's a lot of problems in the book. Yeah.
Why 28 meetups?
Maritza,
amazing.
with your permission, I'm going to correct myself. The three things that Polya talked about was intellectual courage, intellectual honesty, and third one was wise restraint. I think it is worth reading those three things because those are the virtues of having the inductive mindset. The first point needs intellectual courage. You need courage to revise your beliefs. Galileo challenging the prejudice of his contemporaries and the authority of Aristotle is a great example of intellectual courage. The second point needs intellectual honesty to stick to my conjecture that has been clearly contradicted by experience just because it is my conjecture would be dishonest. The third point needs wise restraint. To change a belief without serious examination, just for the sake of fashion, for example, would be foolish. Yet we have neither the time nor the strength to examine seriously all our beliefs. Therefore, it is wise to reserve the day's work, our questions, and our active doubts for such beliefs as we can reasonably expect to amend. Do not believe anything, but question only what is worth questioning. Intellectual courage, intellectual honesty, and wise restraint are the moral qualities of the scientist, George Polya.
That's really funny because I have that open and that's what I was going to read as well. I'm going to, Shrikant was just quoting George Polya. I'm going to quote what CJ wrote immediately after because the questions he poses based on those 3 points are profound. Should we be ready to revise any of our beliefs? Do you have that much intellectual courage? Should we change our beliefs whenever we discover they are disputed by experience? Do you have that much intellectual honesty? Should we refrain from changing our beliefs excessively? Do you have the wise restraint to resist changing your beliefs without a good reason? So I just thought that those were interesting questions to pose to ourselves and to each other. You know, when we're looking at this essay, for me, I really like the observation here of um, illusions and kind of the value of illusions here. So there's another quote that CJ shares with us where Polya is observing that there may be circumstances in which it is not wise to cling to illusions. And I like that because it, in addition to the other lines we just read, it paints the picture of, you know, intentionality and moderation, which is always enticing to me. The idea that we are going to pause and then intentionally determine whether or not we're going to eschew a belief or hold on to it or modify it in some way. I like that it is expressed both by Polya and by CJ that it is as important to consider what one will keep as it is to consider what one may not wish to keep. I think it's this call of finding balance. Like, you know, if you throw away your entire belief system, you may find yourself, you know, like the cartoon characters that are dancing on air and then they fall because they don't have a platform. So maybe better small pieces, and if you do it in smaller pieces, you have a higher hope of having looked at it and determined whether or not it's truly something that should be removed. So I kind of really like the that idea. And in our last meetup on this topic, it was asked of CJ about whether he was actually talking about experiences or if he was talking about something else. And he actually said it's all experience relatively. And I think that it's a humanizing way to look at this idea of, you know, what you're going to look to keep or not. I'm going to pause there because I see Bob would like to speak. Please go ahead, Bob.
I don't know if this is if I'm fitting this in appropriately, but I wanted to react to what Jeannie said. You said that right about sticking a pin into the socket and whether that was a good idea or not. Well, you could test that. That would be a form of induction. But there is another factor there, and that is that your mother did not recommend that. Now, following a mother's order, should I follow a mother's order or not? That is a form of induction on its own. It's a different category of induction, but maybe it's wiser to follow the mother because you've done that a few times and she's made some pretty good recommendations. So go with that. And if you want to stick a pin into the socket, you better learn about that on the outside and separate it and take your mother's advice. That's my comment.
That's great. Thank you, Bob. You know,
Welcome.
I have Shrikant. Go ahead, please, Shrikant.
So I was thinking about this, and I keep coming back to Bayes' law that we've looked at, and the idea of Sapolsky. I think he's just borrowing from somebody else. The idea of strong beliefs weakly held. Okay, I think that's very fundamental. So I would say intellectual courage is not just about being ready to correct your beliefs. It also is about trying to have best conjectures you can, regardless of whether those conjectures are consonant with what everybody else thinks. It is kind of putting yourself out there and saying, look, this is what I think. This is what it appears to be. Because if you never do that, if you're afraid to do that, you're not going to break new ground. So I think that intellectual courage, I would attribute it to that. Then intellectual honesty actually captures what Polya is talking about of intellectual courage, as well as the honesty of saying that I will see whether I will be honest and open to all the evidence, regardless of what I hold. And I like the Bayesian way of thinking about it, is that you're not trying to confirm your theory, but you're trying to disprove it. You're trying to look for things that will prove you wrong, instead of the contradiction. And so that would be the second thing. And the third thing is also very important, of that you can't just arbitrarily pick and choose your hypothesis. You need to put a lot of work into the hypothesis, because otherwise you will not be able to put anything together. So that wise restraint is also a critical part. So but if there aren't that many people talking about it, I would love to ask a question at this point, if Maritza, it's okay with you, of which of these three things you find the most challenging. Do you find that you don't have enough intellectual courage? Do you find you have not enough intellectual honesty? Or do you find that you don't have enough wise restraint? If you'd like to have the courage to answer that, or the honesty to answer that, or the wise restraint, please go ahead and type an exclamation mark. You don't need to answer it, but if you'd like to answer it, you're welcome to do that. We'll start with Bob.
Let's see. Once again, I'm not sure that I'm replying appropriately. Shrikant, you said strong beliefs weakly held. Well, my thoughts are the pursuit of truth is different from the desire to get across your idea, whether it's true or not. Now, the pursuit of truth, we can go with induction. You could say it's a scientific process. It's an inductive process, and you can go after truth if you want. But if you want to hold something that is questionably true or not, typically illustrated in politics, or let me see. I had an example here. Well, I can't, I get lost. If your desire to promote some point, which is not necessarily true, is very strong, well, that desire has consequences. And if you have a desire, a question is, does your experience have a data set of what happens to you when you desire something strongly? I think of a example as a temper tantrum. If you throw a temper tantrum, you may have a good motive for that, but if your experience is if you throw 10 temper tantrums and 9 of them turn out very badly for you, well, that's an inductive process, and maybe you don't want to throw temper tantrums anymore. So be careful when you hold something strongly.
Thank you, Bob. So let me come back to the question. So the question is, what do you think you lack most? Intellectual courage, intellectual honesty, or wise restraint? If you'd like to answer that, please go ahead and type in exclamation mark. Next up is going to be Jeannie and Katie. And you don't have to just say yes or no. You can just talk about it a little bit. Jeannie, go ahead.
So I think courage is number one. I'll tell you why, is because if you don't have the courage, then the restraint isn't going to do you any good. I mean, you must step forward in order to make any progress, whatever. And the honesty also, I think a lot of times is not clear ahead of time and becomes more and more clear after the fact. So you may go into something without really knowing whether it's true or false, good or bad, whatever. Judgment is going to come down on it later. You may have a plan for your community that's going to build something, and then it ends up, a tragedy because it's dangerous. And I mean, we had somebody put up a sculpture and they had the pointing finger and everybody, and it was at eye level, so it was a disaster, and they tried to remedy it in all kinds of ways, but not everything, works out the way you think it would. I mean, it was a beautiful sculpture, but it had this scary aspect of being eye level. So anyway, I think courage is the number one thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Next up is Katie.
I wanted to comment too on what Jeannie wrote. I agreed, or said, I agreed that going in, you might not know whether your hypothesis is right. I mean, you might assume, like as Bob was saying, hypothesis A would be, your mom is right and you shouldn't stick your pin in the socket, or the other way. The other hypothesis, your mom doesn't know what she's talking about and she's paranoid. And that's for various reasons. And usually, if it's your mother, she probably has your best interests at heart. So she's probably right. It's probably pretty safe to assume that she knows what she's talking about. But I agree that often you won't know. You'll be venturing out. Like you might say, oh, I keep on getting sick from that restaurant. Is it salt? Is it they're not cooking it right? Or you'll have to work with multiple hypotheses.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is Maritza.
I had a short but intense conversation with myself in my brain about this because, I was going, it's the intellectual courage. No, it's the intellectual honesty. No, it's the intellectual courage. And I think what I've deduced is that it's a little bit of both. I think for me, if I'm putting it in the personal realm for myself, there's this almost fear of whether or not I'm truly being intellectually honest. Like, am I being courageous in reconsidering this belief? Or am I being dishonest? Like there are some ideas that I may have walked with for a long time that, new information comes to light and I find myself saying, well, this information doesn't discredit this piece that I found to be true about this idea. And so I make the decision to not eschew that belief. But there's always that small little nagging voice in my mind wondering if that's a fairly valid deduction I'm making, or if it's one I'm making, even if it's a subconscious dishonesty, is it dishonest because I'm not, looking deep enough to ensure that I'm stable in holding on to whatever belief it is I decided to hold on to. So not always, but I think that would be one that I don't have, I don't feel just a very simple certainty that, yes, I did this, it was honest, I'm good. There's always the question of, well, but was it honest? From the perspective of holding on to a previously held belief.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. Next up is Laura. Laura, go ahead. You'll need to unmute.
There's Julie also.
Oh, Judy. Okay. Just a second. So let's go with Julie while Laura is unmuting. Julie, go ahead.
The first thing I was thinking about was if the pursuit is truth, openness, and then it occurred to me that is really the honesty part, because anytime you think you're right or you're closed, there's something to look at, and you have to be honest with yourself about how tightly you're holding on to a certain hypothesis or whatever. So I think the ability to constantly check yourself and your motives and be open all the time for things to change and not be, stuck on one idea. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. If Laura has not unmuted, let me go ahead and talk about this. So let me put myself, Laura, go ahead.
Okay, I've been reading this from a very different perspective, and maybe because I'm sort of dedicated to the art of problem solving by Polya. But I'm reading this as a math student would, okay, where the theorem is the hypothesis, and it's something that you have to show to be true. And it takes a lot of courage just to start that kind of thing, because you have no idea what it's about. And you have to begin to compile information from things that you've already proven. And, I guess that would be the things that we hold true, that we feel some honesty. Well, any time you prove a theorem in toto, every line that you've written in it has truth, and that is absolutely unequivocally true, and the whole proof has to be that way. So you start with these things, but when you put them together, they don't necessarily have that same honesty, because when you put them together, then they begin not to make sense anymore. So you have to begin to rethink what you thought about these things. Anyway, and you go sort of line by line in the development of the proof, and you can go all the way through. You can go through it and say, QED, I proved it, and in fact find out that you did not prove it. What you did was not true. There's errors in it. So what you believe to be true all the way through was not true, and you have to go back and sort of think about what you did wrong. Where did you go wrong? Where did you accept something that you shouldn't have? And you have to revisit your thinking, and you have to be willing to do that. A lot of times you don't want to admit to it. So it's a whole process like that. It's very iterative every time you do a proof. And I don't know, I see this kind of iterative process of going through and constantly having to relook, to look again at what you believe to be true in your new environment. In the case of a theorem, it's the next line in the proof. Maybe in the case of our lives, it's the next day in which we live. But it's constant thing that we have to do. And it's through that we get these minuscule moments of improvement, actually, in our lives. We don't always see how much we improve. You know, when you said you get to that moment where you know, sort of feel like, you know, you realize that you know, didn't, it wasn't true what you were thinking or something. And you say to yourself, why didn't I see that sooner? Sometimes you can't see it sooner because it comes only after you've gone through the whole process to understand that it wasn't what you thought it was. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that I actually went through this kind of process doing mathematics, and also I see polio very much from a different perspective when I do it, because I look at it from his, you know, his teaching of mathematics and his metacognitive approach, but I also, that also fits into the same thing. I mean, it's a much I won't say simpler approach, but it was designed to, you know, for to teach problem solving. So in some ways it is, but it's the same thing. It's very pure, you know, he's very true to his soul. It's a comprehensivist kind of approach to problem solving. And it's very sleek and very beautiful, but it's also, it has richness in the same kind of approach. It's comprehensiveness, and it's really, it's worth reading that little bit too.
Yes.
So that's what I have to say.
Excellent.
Not so eloquently.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Really appreciate you bringing in the mathematics point. So really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up is going to be Jeannie, and then I will, then me. Jeannie, go ahead. Jeannie, you need to unmute.
Okay, one of the words that CJ often used, and I hope I get it pronounced correctly, it's two words actually, cognitive dissonance. And this kind of speaks to what Julie had brought up. Sometimes two things that we know are actually contradictory. So then what do you do? And oftentimes the data is contradictory. Go ahead, Shrikant.
So I'll try to answer this question, you know, intellectual courage, intellectual honesty, and wise restraint. I will note that actually all of them are quite difficult because they all have to go against your emotions, you know, courage against your wanting to be safe, you know, honesty against your love of whatever ideas that you hold, and then the wise restraint of being attracted by something new. So you have to, it is like stepping one level up at the kind of organizational level. You know, you're moving your mind away from your reactive part or system 2 part in order to take a perspective on what is going on. So there is a, you know, like throughout my history, I've been really interested in things. So I have to always watch out for going, you know, having that wise restraint part. And you have to kind of say, okay, what is the value of this new thing with respect to whatever else I have? And so to use that, you use some kind of a framework to evaluate what you should pursue and not pursue. The intellectual courage is actually a very deep point, because it's saying, are you willing? Because what happens is, you know, things present to yourself at the edge of your consciousness of saying, maybe this is true. You know, nobody thinks this, but maybe this is true. From all the little dots that you have seen outside at the edge, you're saying, maybe this is true. And it does take a lot of courage to say, okay, I'm going to actually evaluate it. In terms of intellectual honesty, the biggest point that I see here is the role of action. So what happens is that Polya is coming at it from, you know, mathematics and science. But when you're, you know, like when I'm thinking about these things in terms of ideas that guide my action, the action component is crucial. It's like whatever it is that you think, bring it into practice. So in that sense, I like, John Boyd's approach of OODA loop, that you're going through this continuous loop. So it is not just that you're trying to be honest about it, you're actually testing out, or you're acting on everything that you know, and then carefully observing it. So that action component, I think, is a crucial part of maintaining the the you know the connection to reality, because without that action component, it is very easy to hold on to something and not notice that it conflicts with things. So I would highlight that part as a crucial part of the process. All right. So Maritza, what do you think now? Should we go for the presentations?
I think so. I didn't see anyone else, unless anyone who just joined wanted to take a minute or two to discuss their main takeaways from the essay. I can give 30 seconds if anyone wants to type an exclamation mark to discuss the essay specifically. No, she can't. I think we're ready to move on to the presentations.
Sounds good.
Jeannie, would you like to go first? Is that a yes? Thumbs up. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation if you have a presentation you'd like to share. Right now I have Jeannie and myself do have a presentation, but we would love to open the floor to you if you do as well.
Okay, well, I think my voice is holding up. It's not perfect, but can you hear me all okay?
Yes.
If anybody needs something repeated, somebody else can help. So this is a visual exercise anyway, in inductive thinking. And I'll show an image, and please get a pencil. And you look at it a bit, you look at the image and make a hypothesis. If you opt out, you won't get the point. We have to think inductively at times, even though deductive reasoning is better. When you have all the data, the next step feels secure. But all too often, you don't have nearly enough data. Then you must use induction to go forward. So men and women will likely do this exercise differently, mainly because men don't want to do a Simon Says with women usually. Inductive thinking can make you look like a fool. If you have the wrong hypothesis, you can look very, very bad. So many people could kind of hold back and hesitate until they feel more secure about having enough data. So again, look at the picture and jot down your hypothesis. Don't use chat because that would be groupthink. And often in groupthink, you have a leader that kind of changes the dynamics. And treat this like a life and death situation, possibly. You don't have enough data. Okay, so now I'm going to start. Oops, let me see this. Oops, there I am. Okay. Now, can you see this? Let's see. Good. Yes. Okay, first image. Jot down your hypothesis. What is it? Go back to this one. This is just the first one again. Okay, jot down your hypothesis. I hope I'm not going too fast or too slow. Yes. Okay, last one. And just, whoops, and just so you know, this is a red cape. That's a hint. So, everybody ready? Who spotted the crime? Anybody? How many people saw a sex crime? Was there any irrelevant data? If nothing else, was anyone alarmed that a baby might be dropped? That would be a kind of instinctual reaction, I would think. This is a doorbell camera scenario. And this is McLuhan's global village, which in his eyes was not a pleasant place. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton's idea of village was a place of connectedness. A lot of it has to do, I think, with the inductive thinking, where we automatically assume the worst of others. Did anyone use multiple hypotheses? And would anyone else like to analyze this? Thank you.
So if anyone wants to analyze it, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Julie, go ahead.
I was just really interesting because it was a story that kept changing, and with new information, it was really interesting. Was thinking it was a kidnapping, and I was thinking, "Hey, she's over here." Hey, at first I thought it was a fireman putting out a fire, and I'm not sure what those windows and those doors were. They may have been irrelevant. I don't know. It's an interesting exercise. It kind of reminds me of that story about, I don't know what it is, but it's about with each new fact, the entire story changed. And the point of the whole thing is we really don't know what reality is because new variables keep coming in all the time, which could change it. We need to keep open to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I also found that it was my concept of what was relevant did keep changing. I think that was what was most striking to me. Was I was like, well, wait a minute, is that not necessary? And then when I saw the little the baby just hanging out in the air there, I was like, is there a piece now? Because by then there'd been a couple pieces added back. So then I was wondering, is there something underneath the baby that I'm missing that has not yet been revealed? So I was kind of wondering about that. And I feel like the person all the way on the right probably was information that could have been ignored all along. Just my 2 cents. Thanks, Jeannie. That's interesting. I always like the visual. 3D is always a nice way to look at things differently. I appreciate it. Next up, I have Katie. Katie, you said you had an example you wanted to share?
Oh, I was responding to Jeannie's comment. We might not have a lot of information to work with. We might just have one example. And that was something that coming into tonight, I was trying to understand. I'm like, isn't what they tell you not to do? Like you have an anecdote and then someone tells you like, that's just an anecdote. So I was confused coming in the difference between induction and, yeah. That was something I wanted to figure out by the end of the night.
Thank you, Katie. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, I wanted to say that actually the relevant information in there was that the mailman had not yet picked up the mail, because you saw there was a letter in the box and the flag was up on the mailbox. Did anybody notice that? Mailman hadn't been there yet today.
I did not. That's fun. No, I did not notice that. She can't. Go ahead.
So I really, really like what Jeannie does with these visuals. So just appreciate that. Unfortunately, I have to take a call, so sorry about this. Over to you, Maritza.
Okay, no worries. He will be back. Well, guys, that means you have the misfortune or pleasure, depending on your perspective, of I'm going to share my presentation next. So I occasionally here, you guys have seen me, what I try doing. I did a triangulating 3 concept for my presentations. It was something I was doing before we decided to venture back into CJ's book. And so I've kind of kept it going whenever time allows for these get-togethers here. So for this one, when I was looking at the essay, we're talking about induction. And to me, from a slightly, I don't want to say simplistic perspective, but if I were to look at it in layman's terms, the admonition here is change, keep light-footed, constantly, be ready to shift your ideas and your thinking. Now that theme is explored here in different ways through different means in our comprehensivity. So what I did for today was I picked 3 concepts. They're philosophical concepts that are entire theorems. It's a philosophy that somebody has created and put out in the world, stating a different way of thinking or of a way for embracing changing thought. So three of them that I'm looking at here, I have Paul Feyerabend's epistemological anarchism. We have Thomas Kuhn's theory of paradigm shifts. And then I'm looking at William James's theorem of armed pragmatism. So these are 3 ways of thinking differently. So that's where I'm going there. I'm going to share that with you now. What I have is I give you a little write-up on some details for, oh wait, I'm sorry, one second. Let me So what I do is I'll give you some details on what each concept is first, and then we'll go into a little bit of comparison and contrast of the three. And what I did with that, just because time was a little limited, I kind of tried to tie it into the essay. So we'll go from there. All right, now that's set up. So the very first here is epistemological anarchism. So this concept here is from Paul Feyerabend. Now they were very, it was very controversial. He was saying that so what he was trying to do was state that we should not be considering a specific method for scientific, like the scientific method, right? So he was saying that we should challenge anything that could be challenged in order to avoid any dogmatic approaches in science. So, his critics were worrying that that his stance could lead to relativism, or where there's no distinction between science and non-science, and that this could delegitimize scientific inquiry. But his supporters were praising him for saying that he's challenging dogmatic approaches and that he's advocating for more open and inclusive understanding of what scientific practice can be. And they were seeing his work as a liberating force that encourages diversity of thought and method in the scientific community. So, what he was looking at in the concept of epistemological anarchism was the idea of looking at. So he suggested that you use any and all methods available, including those that might contradict established scientific norms. And he's saying if they prove useful in generating new knowledge or solving scientific problems, then it's valid to question it. He also saw parallels between scientific practice and the arts, and he suggested that creativity and innovation in science are as important as they are in artistic endeavors. I think a lot of us here would probably agree with that. So this is the first concept that I wanted to share with you as a theorem for a different way of thinking. The second one I have here is paradigm shifts. So I was looking at Thomas Kuhn's theory of paradigm shifts. So he introduced the concept to describe, and he described concept of paradigms as a set of norms, practices, and theoretical assumptions that define a scientific discipline at any particular period. Now, these separate things, the concept of paradigms, normal science, role of anomalies, scientific revolutions and paradigm shifts, and then incommensurability, they're kind of like steps that he views as the what goes through, what actually happens as you're going through a paradigm shift. So he uses the term paradigm shift to refer to a major change in the world view, concepts, and practices of how something works or is accomplished. And he does say that a paradigm shift can happen within a wide variety of contexts, from scientific research to industry. And he's looking at the idea that over time, observations and results that cannot be explained or accommodated by the existing paradigm will accumulate. And when these observations or results, known as anomalies, the ones that can't be accommodated, when they become particularly troublesome, they will precipitate a crisis. And that will lead to increasing dissatisfaction with the prevailing paradigm And then what happens is that, there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of unrest, and there's going to be different shifts happening. And so the scientific revolution happens when the community of scientists adopts a new paradigm that radically changes the conceptual and experimental foundation of the field. So then what we're looking at here is that the shift is not just a change in scientific theory, but it involves a transformation in the norms and practices governing the field. So this was the second concept for different thinking that I was sharing with you. And the third one I have here is pragmatism. Now, pragmatism, there are several different thinkers. So William James is one of the key figures. He developed pragmatism alongside other thinkers like Charles Sanders Peirce and John Dewey. But his interpretation has unique features and a distinctive focus. And so that's the one that I was presenting here today. So he's proposing the pragmatic method as a way to clarify concepts and hypotheses by tracing their practical effects. So essentially, it's the meaning of any idea or proposition lies in its observable consequences in experience. So this method serves as a tool for solving metaphysical disputes that might otherwise seem intractable. And it's done by directing attention from abstract theorizing to practical outcomes. And that's, at heart of one of the major key principles. And this philosophy is grounded in what he called radical empiricism. And that's positing that the experience includes both the relations between things and the things themselves, and that both are equally real. And here we're looking at the idea of humanism and individualism. For him, he placed significant emphasis on individual experience and the capacity of individuals to shape their own destinies through belief and action. So, his concept of pragmatism has a distinctly humanistic flavor because he is stressing the importance of human agency and the value of individual perspectives in constructing and understanding reality. Okay, so these three are the three ideas I was presenting here for you today. We have the epistemological anarchism, paradigm shifts, and pragmatism. Now, looking at comparing and contrasting them, I just have some high-level things up here for them. So from the philosophical foundations for all three, I have them here. So epistemological anarchism is asserting that no universal scientific method is applicable for all circumstances. The paradigm shifts are describing the progress of scientific knowledge not as a steady cumulative endeavor, but as a series of discontinuous shifts in the fundamental framework of scientific ideas. And pragmatism is focusing on practical effects of ideas as the core of their truth and meaning. If we look at what are they saying about truth and reality, or what are they postulating, as it were, since they are theorems? Epistemological anarchism is proposing a form of relativism where truth can vary based on the methodological approach that is employed. And paradigm shifts are suggesting that truth is model dependent, and pragmatism is defining truth as what is expedient in our thinking. I have a lot more notes on these, but I'm just going to give you the top level bullets I have here. So looking at these three, what is their approach for scientific progress? Epistemological anarchism is seeing scientific progress as an open-ended, anarchic anarchic process that resists any predefined path. So in here, he's arguing that scientific advances can sometimes come from the violation of accepted norms and standards. And thus he's advocating for a more inclusive and less controlled approach to scientific inquiry. For paradigm shifts, the methodology here is that normal science is governed by the reigning paradigm, which dictates what questions are meaningful and what methods are acceptable. Pragmatism believes that progress comes through the application and practical verification of ideas. So pragmatism here suggests that methodologies should be judged by their results and their their adaptability to human purposes and needs, rather than by their adherence to prior theoretical frameworks. And so that's it. I feel like it's a lot that I'm throwing at you, and I know that these are not concepts or philosophers that we have previously engaged and studied. So I do apologize for that. I just wanted to bring in something that was new, but still related to the essay topic that we were doing today. So I'm hoping that I didn't lose you all, and I would invite you to pose any questions that you would like. Love to hear your thoughts. Bob, please go ahead.
Let's see if I can comment on those three guys. The epistemological approach, there are my notes here, no universal methods that you can use in a scientific thing. My comment on that is that anytime you try to create a system with rules, well, there's this guy, I don't know if we've gone into that. This guy, his name is Kurt Gödel. He says that you always can find a rule that's outside of the rules that you're working with. So you got to expect that. I could try to give some examples, but maybe I'll come back to that. What was the next one? Was paradigm shifts. You certainly, when you go through a procedure, you can get big surprises, and they cause you to take different approaches. I think this happened with evolution, a theory of evolution. Did things evolve smoothly, or did some things suddenly come into some big evolutionary change, which changed the process of evolution? There's some evolutionists that talk about that. The last one was pragmatism. I'm not sure I captured all of that, but I guess you have to expect practical results, regardless of what you're doing with your science. It should be practical. It should be adaptable to real situations. And I can think of all kinds of things that could have happened in history. And I don't. Let me see. I don't know. While you were talking, I was thinking about agriculture. I don't know anything about agriculture, but there's I assume there's all kinds of science that goes into it. Crops are very important. So people scientists work very hard to bring the science into agriculture so that you can get great results. So you could go about doing that, but what happens if and I'll think about your approach may not be universally applicable, because what happens if you work very hard on your agriculture and there's a tremendous flood and it messes everything up? Where is your science now? Well, you forgot to take that into account. What are you going to do with your food processing now? So there you go. Those are just my thoughts, Maritza.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. I may want to comment, but first I'd like to hear Jeannie's thoughts. Jeannie, go ahead.
Well, the one question I had is, I don't know anything about Paul Firebend, and if you could, is he contemporary or, you know, when he wrote? But I'll start backwards since Bob started forward. So starting with pragmatism, I love it. I mean, it's more important to be useful than to be true, in my opinion. So I'm all for pragmatism. On the paradigm shifts, what's interesting to me is I grew up on Kuhn and I loved him, and we all studied him, and every class was studying him. Everybody was studying him. And then afterwards, people said there is no such thing as paradigm shift. And I mean, he was slammed so bad and just put down in every way, and almost, I mean, almost demolished. And now it's kind of coming back. I mean, I don't know what was wrong with the idea of paradigm shift, but for some reason it received a lot of bad intentions. And the problem to me with the what's with the other one, the anarchism, is that if you don't use the same method to study something, then you can't do a very good comparative study. And so it makes a difference. You know, say you're studying bees and you do it one way, and then you're studying, you know, hornets and you do a whole different kind of approach. Well, you're not going to be able to compare those two studies as well if they've been used so differently and, you know, using a different approach. Okay, thank you.
So that's an interesting. Let me go back to that for a minute, because that seems to be one that a couple folks are struggling with. So first, I just want to remind folks that these you know, I provided these three concepts from these three thinkers, not as advertisement for something I assume or something that I uphold, and also not for something. Well, I'm not an expert. Just want to put that out there. I'm also not putting them out there saying that I think I'm endorsing them in any direction. These are three thinkers that exist that have invited us to inductive thinking is how I viewed it, and it was just why I chose the three of them, and that's how I was aligning it with the essay from today. So, Paul Feyerabend is the name of the philosopher who came up with the epistemological anarchism, and it's from a book that he disclosed, and I'm sorry, not a book, it's a paper. I think it's in the 1960s. I can find exact when and give more details. And I don't I from what I understood of what I read in the paper, he's not saying that, well, actually, he may be saying this, but I think the ultimate goal that he's trying to get at is that adherence to strict rational or empirical methods does not necessarily lead to the truth, and it may be stifling to scientific innovation. I think that is the more important takeaway from what he's uh you know, he's putting up there and saying for us. Like, he argues for, you know, more flexible, inclusive, and creativity in science, and because he thinks that only looking at the scientific method that's um you know, tried and true and never deviating could potentially be stifling. So that's what I don't think well, he might be, because again, I'm not an expert. He might be saying that don't you know, that hop around method to method, but I think what he's saying is don't only look at this method here. This is my thinking. Let me call on David. David, hi. I bet you know way more about any of these three thinkers than I possibly could ever know.
I can't say that. Cannot say. But I'm familiar with the Polya books and the work that he was doing and the kind of inductive reasoning there. And because mathematics is a special realm, his view of how inductive reasoning works might be kind of shaded by this sort of perspective, not necessarily the comprehensivist perspective, So I could talk a little bit about, what I see Polly's kind of approach giving us. And I was really starting off with a question about what's called epistemic morals, why the word morals is actually used, because morals has another context, another connotation, right? One, being right about the facts is not actually a moral issue, but being right about choosing reasons to act is a moral issue. So I won't stick on that subject. I'll go right into the question of induction, assuming that we're really looking at only the scientific, not the moral concerns, because I think that's a different dimension. And you tell me, because you're talking about theories and paradigms and reason and understanding. So I think
So sorry to confuse you. So you came in at a very awkward part.
I
So
did. Yeah.
yeah, you came in and we had more. So the way we've been doing these evenings is we spend the first portion talking about our takeaways from the essay and specifically talking about stuff in the essay itself. But then for the second half of the evening, what we do is we invite people to provide presentations that are like essay adjacent. So they have 10 drills from the essay, but because this is Comprehensivist Wednesdays, we it doesn't have to be like exactly from the essay, just kind of in the gist. And so what I tend to do is I do a triangulating 3 presentation where I pick different concepts that are kind of distantly related to the essay, but mostly they're related in um, gist of the concept we were discussing in the essay. So just to help you figure out why on earth we're talking about paradigm shifts and pragmatism when we're talking about CJ's essay, it's because of Maritza. It's Maritza's fault. These were the 3 I chose saying, hey, I think these 3 thinkers are also inviting an inductive type of thinking. So let's look at them a little bit. So that's kind of what I did.
Okay. Well, I'm sort of in the midst of a responsibility that I grandpa sit, and so I'm just taking a little break, but I'm sort of on duty. So I'm not sure how to handle, my response to CJ's essay. Should I say that now or try to come back later? Okay.
No, go for it. It's past, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. Why not? I don't think any of us stands on ceremony. Go for it.
Oh, thanks. Okay. So I think with CJ, with a comprehensivist view, I think he's interested in the moral concerns, but this essay seemed really focused on the epistemic, the knowledge concerns, which I think is different. How to act is different from knowing what the facts are in the world. Knowing the facts doesn't tell you what's the value I should have. So there's different things. So I'm looking at the induction claims for moral knowledge, for knowledge acquisition. And to incorporate and integrate multiple systems of thought seems to be the problem CJ is projecting. And there's a claim made at the beginning of the essay, we need a tool to value what is asserted by each of the traditional systems. Like, how do you compare them? They're incomparable. So what's our tool for comparing them? And he's saying, Polly is saying, well, all knowledge is conjectures anyway. It's all guesses. So they're all kind of in a soup equal. And I think this is sort of false, actually. But he defines a process of induction, which seems to be honing in on truth, as though there's a single truth and knowledge, and we're focusing by this process. So here's the Polya process. Is A, we use experience, because as CJ points out, all reasoning uses experience. And we want to improve our guessing using experience. Polya says you have to guess an answer before you can prove anything. He's very mathematical. So yeah, you have to kind of conjure a theorem in order to prove, to know what direction you're heading in. You sort of have to find an answer you want to test out. And reasoning is about securing knowledge. And the inductive technique is A, extracting the most correct belief from the set of data, your experience you have, and B, the alternative, gathering the most appropriate kind of experience and data to formulate correct beliefs and test the beliefs you have. So it's a two-way street. Is what's the right thing to think with this, and what things do I have to use to construct knowledge and test out what I already believe? That's his inductive loop. And the point in induction is using empiricism as your fundamental ground for believing things. Whatever the evidence shows, that's going to drive the belief system. So the inductive attitude is we have illusions, or some of them are true. Science wants truth, not illusions. So science aims at the total maximal correct knowledge. And he puts 3 values up there for us to get to the most correct knowledge. 1, 2, 3. Any belief has to be ready to be revised. This is our intellectual courage. Changing a belief must happen when you have compelling reasons. This is intellectual honesty. And third, don't change your belief without good reasons. That's wise restraint. Okay, we get those 3 ideas. But I think we sort of miss the paradigm of something that philosophy has brought us to, an idea of sublation, the idea of simultaneously admitting something's not true because it's not true fully in completeness for understanding. But as we cancel it out and take something else to be our truth, realizing that that is also a one-sided point of view, and you have to put them both together and weave them together somehow. So you cancel the old, but you offer a new approach, and you preserve both in the process. That brings you to a higher level. Now that's sort of a comprehensivism by preserving all the truths of each of the encounters and each of their experience. Everyone is speaking the truth, but they're contradicting each other. Yes, you have to rise to a higher level to accommodate all those truths. That's called sublation. So this is like a Hegelian term because there's always a conflict of ideas, and the technique is called dialectical. But it ties into induction because you're taking more evidence in the context that it is believed and true. And the contrary evidence defies that. And you have to then construct a new paradigm, yes, a new zeitgeist, a new spirit, a new consciousness, an understanding of the new thing. Yes, it's not a particle, it's a wave. Oh, look, is it behaving everywhere like a wave? That truth has to be fully explored and examined. And the two have to be seen canceling each other out, but they're both true. So you have to have a way to subsume them both, okay? Transitions don't seem to follow a progressive, predictable attitude, but in Hegel's understanding, these transitions are absolutely necessary. You have to have Newton before you can dismiss Newtonian mechanics. You have to fully, you can't jump to something without having started with Newton. There's a necessary progression of things. So comprehensivism, before changing beliefs, we have to account for all the traditions. That's what CJ says. Maybe this merely means all the traditions that we know so far. We can't go beyond what we have in our hands. And if we take too narrow, CJ says, if we take too narrow a knowledge base, we're riding roughshod an imperialist tyranny with our current paradigm. So the social integrating we must consider has to take the other views of experience in their terms, right? And recognize there's a necessary progress that's going to come out of the denials that are being asserted against each theory has to confront its contradictions. And neither of them is going to stand in the end. It's going to go, multiple hypotheses is one way that CJ talked about this. It's, you have to actually hold both paradigms together in your head and understand these aren't united yet until you can combine them in such a way that they're married. So these working hypotheses, I see that as CJ's term for something that's not really hatched yet. We're using wise restraint and not destroying everything we've already learned, and we're preserving them. but the result of truly integrating them is a process called dialectic. And that's like, this is the Hegelian form of logic, which I wish CJ had been more aware of, and that Polya, being a mathematician, doesn't necessarily take into account, because in mathematics, contradiction is death. And this is a little more complicated than that. It's new notions that arise. So you have a breaking, the egg breaks, and that's called a paradigm shift. Polya wasn't ready to deal with that. Okay, so that's my induction from Polya married to comprehensivism, sort of to me becomes a dialectical process, which you've talked about many aspects of it. And that's, I just wanted to present that from my reading of CJ's essay on this topic.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you. Thanks for I'm glad you chimed in. And I also it's funny because listening to you, I'm like, oh, I can see aspects of what you're describing in some of these other thinkers that I had presented. So I invite anyone, if you would like to comment on some of the things that David just said, if you want to so there's a couple people still in the queue. If you want to comment on my presentation, either one is fine. Next up, I have Laura.
And
Laura Shapiro.
thanks so much. I may not be able to hang around. I'd love to hang around, but I have some duties here. And I just want to say Hegel was in the 1800s, early 1800s, just so we're dated. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Sorry, go ahead, Laura. Laura Shapiro? Are you? I'm not sure if she's there.
Got it. I'm overwhelmed by listening to David. I don't know if I can speak. Well, I just had a little tip. I don't think you can have different truths to one thing. Truth is truth, you know, and that's it. I mean, there's one truth. That's it. Truth is a thing. When you reach truth, you reach something that is it's the ultimate, you know. There's one truth. That's all
I will. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. I will actually respectfully disagree with that premise. And I think that we've actually discussed that here. We've actually discussed it with CJ. One of the essays that we get into with him addresses the concept of truth and whether or not there is one truth.
Well, I guess being a mathematics person, there's one truth. You know, and I think, I guess, having done that, you know, I mean, I sort of view the world in that way. Maybe just I got too inculcated by mathematics, but I do believe when you say QED, it's QED. You know, every line, every word has a purpose and a meaning, and you remove one, destroy the whole proof, kind of thing. Everything disintegrates, but you know, that's how solid the truth is. So, and you know, it may be hard to come to it. You know, you can't just necessarily whip out a proof in a few minutes. I mean, some people can. Some people have to dig harder and deeper and more, you know, and they get lost in it. And all these things that we've been talking about, you know, happen in doing that kind of work. But I think when you do that kind of work, you become that kind of person too. You know, I think my personality has definitely become what it is because of mathematics. I mean, I'm a systems person. I love OOLOOP. I love, you know, talking about many of the things that we do because it relates to what became important to me as I grew up, you know, and was studying mathematics as I was an adult growing up. But these topics are really interesting, and CJ was a genius. You know, now that I'm reading more, and because I only knew of his work for about a year, and I know how much there is, and how much, and reading it is a whole different thing than listening to him. It's takes a lot to unravel it, you know, and put it back together. There's no doubt we could probably talk about this tomorrow and have different responses after sleeping on it.
Thank you, Laura.
One more thing. How come fundamentalists are never discussed?
I'm not certain I understand the question. Never
Fundamental.
discussed.
fundamentalists as a group, you know, that in terms of their philosophy and so forth, does it ever fit
Eh,
into anything?
I'm not certain how you mean. I don't think we exclude any thinkers here. But yeah, no, you
All right.
are. I'm not sure I understand the question. I don't think that there's an answer. I think propose the topic if you want to,
Oh,
you know.
okay,
I'm
okay,
Can I respond?
say
yeah.
again.
Yeah, because I think that a fundamentalist would just be someone that doesn't have possibly is it honesty or courage, whichever the one is it where their system is closed. They don't want to they want to keep their beliefs as they are, and they don't want anything that kind of challenges it. Like David was saying with empiricism, like commitment to the facts, like they wouldn't have commitment to the facts. They would have commitment to their own facts, and then they wouldn't want to, maybe they would leave a Zoom meeting or something if they heard something that conflicted, or they wouldn't go to a Zoom meeting if it conflicted.
So you're talking about like a group of, it's like a dogmatic tendencies. They have, they're thinking of a very strict literal um application of whatever it is their belief is, and they're not open to their minds being changed. So I guess, yeah, from that perspective, I agree with you, Katie, 1,000%. That would be why, in general, maybe we're not going to discuss them because they're not open
I
to
have to
change, and we're all about being open to change, which is frankly why I was a little shocked to hear you say that you believe there's only one truth ever and only one truth. I feel like the explorative and creative spirit would leave one open to the possibility of the truth that one holds as the truth, either not being the entire truth, the only truth, or the truth at all. Um, that's just, but I have a couple people here in queue, so let me go to Bob next.
well, truth. Okay, never mind. We'll talk about it in
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to say that I agree and disagree with everybody. I agree with Laura about truth. I think that you can, no matter what a person believes, you can find some kind of truth in it, and that includes fundamentalists. But we won't go the religious, but we won't go into that. Unless Jeannie, you want
I
to
don't think that's what Laura was saying, though. Laura was saying that there exists only one truth. There's only one truth ever,
Okay.
is what she's saying.
Okay, well, I'll finish my thought. I'm looking. I say that I would say that anytime anybody looks at something, there is one truth about it. You can find it. However, I would, Maritza, you mentioned. I heard you use the word perspective, and that's one of my favorite tools for understanding. That truth is observable with a certain perspective. There are many perspectives, and how do you could take two fundamentalists for that matter, and each one has a different perspective. How would you put those two together? And then David brought up that the Hegelian dialectic. Theoretically, there is a way to find something in common with two different perspectives so that we can put them together and find something. I could give examples. My favorite example is a person looking at a statue. Now, a statue is three-dimensional, but if you stand in one place, you're going to see a certain truth, and that you can, if you describe it enough, you can say that is one truth. I don't want to get into how do you define one. I have a degree in mathematics, so that defining one is not, and two are not so easy. In fact, I know I'm rambling, but Bertrand Russell, I think, wrote a book, hundreds of pages on on defining two. Ridiculous, right? But he did it, and at least I read that. Anyway, so get back to the statue. There's a truth when I look at the statue, but but I'm only seeing the front of the statue. What about the person who's looking from the other, from 180 degrees? Now, so those are two truths. And how do you put those together? If you have 10 people looking at the statue, maybe together you combine them, you can realize that this is
You get one.
not a flat surface, it's a three-dimensional thing. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Somebody wants to talk.
No, you're good, Bob. No worries. I think somebody just forgot to mute.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, continue.
Well, I was sort of finished. I'll go along with Laura. My inquiry would be to name the truth that, or to name the whatever Laura's talking about. Look into it and find some truth there. I don't know if you want to give me time to ramble, but there, I'll change the subject. There is such a thing as wait a minute, a political science. Is political science a science? Ha, ridiculous, right? But nevertheless, they call it science. So I was watching the news today. I know I'm rambling, so you can shut me off at any time. Political science. I was watching the news today, and there's Marjorie Taylor Greene has an opinion about something in how people should vote, but this is she's only looking at it in one way, and there's a truth behind it. I mean, she's a real live human being, and she has motives. We can look into that, but there are other people who disagree, and it would be very nice if politics, if we could get all these people together and they could combine their views and come up with something that is harmonious and good for everybody. Good for everybody. I better stop rambling.
Thanks, Bob.
Welcome.
You know, I want to bring out for you guys some. I'm gonna again use some of CJ's words here for you to go a little bit more into this question of truth. So I did post in the chat a link to a previous discussion we had. It's a YouTube recording of our discussion on shifting perspectives and representing the truth with CJ Fearnley. Now, he provides for us a wonderful video for us to look at from it's Tricia Wang is the one who provides the video. And what she's telling us is that usually we conflate what we see with the truth, and that we should be very, careful to note that what you see doesn't make it the truth just because you saw it. And she's the actual point of what she's saying is she's upholding the concept of shifting perspectives. And she says a perspective shift is the ability to see the world from another person's point of view. And so she recommends the skill of the skill of perspective shifting, which she defines as the ability to see the world from another's point of view. So CJ says that he agrees with her, but he would go one step further. He would place perspective shifts in the broader context of understanding as a thoroughly refined ignorance. He says, this is one of the guiding values we have been developing for our comprehensive learning. In comprehensive learning, we aspire to integrate many perspectives, to use Wang's language. One way to think about our refined ignorance would be to identify each aspect of each perspective with a series of yes-no questions that locates it, as in the game of 20 questions. Then we can imagine other games of 20 questions that distinguish each perspective from the others. Finally, more such games could distinguish the different ways to integrate all of the identified perspectives into a synergetic whole. In this way, our ignorance can be seen as the fabric of questions that structures our comprehensive learning. So the reason I'm saying this is that he further goes on and he reminds us about the meetup we had last week, where we're talking about the multiple working hypotheses and perspective shifts. And what he's saying is, you know, don't trust the truth, in so much as what he's saying is, if you are open to the dance of shift and perspectives, you will constantly be questioning whether or not the truth that you see is the truth. If you never accept that you've seen the truth, then you are eternally curious and childlike and hungry for seeking to understand more deeply and more broadly. And on that note, I'm handing it over to Jeannie.
Well, I wanted to address the fundamentalist perspective a little bit. And I think the situation is not that it's a absolutely closed system, but that all the data comes from one place, and that's the Bible. So the Bible is God's word. And so in terms of especially moral things, you have to refer to the Bible for all your information. Now, if the Bible says contradictory things, or if it can be interpreted in different ways, then it's an open system in that way. So a fundamentalist can study the Bible and come up with different things depending, which book of the Bible and so forth. But the system is closed, that they can only use the Bible for the information. But this is basically only for moral information, because they'll still use science, to make toothpaste and so forth. So that was a little take on the fundamentalist view.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeannie. Next up, I have Caleb, and apologies if I'm saying your name wrong. Caleb, welcome.
Hi Maritza, hi everyone. Thanks. It's Caleb. No worries though. So yeah,
Apologies.
actually, I wanted to share that I'm inclined to agree with Laura as far as the existence of, one truth. And I think what you just quoted from CJ, I think just puts better context around that idea, in that what we often define as the truth is, I think, better described as our representation of what the truth is. And I think, Laura, you might appreciate this, the idea of truth as, truth as, if we were to think of it in mathematical terms, and please correct me if, I'm wrong, or obviously, provide me feedback that might be helpful, based on, the knowledge that you have. If we look at truth as a value that can only be approached asymptotically, so we can get increasingly, infinitesimally close to it.
Uh-huh.
It's the idea of trying to achieve perfection. You can get, you can get infinitely close to it, but you can't actually achieve it. It's not a discrete value that you'll be able to hit. And from that, given that, when we think about it that way, a meaningful approach to arriving at an ever increasing approximation of truth, improving the representation, is the willingness, the openness to other ideas, things that will orient your model. Or, if you were trying to map it as a function, let's say you try one function and it gives you a better approximation. You add another function and, the approximation gets worse. You're off by a few digits. So, okay, that one, the one I added the first time, new perspective, it works. It made the representation better. Oh, but this one, this one doesn't work so well. Well, at least I know I tried it and I can scratch it off the list. It's now something you don't have to come back to. You've eliminated that from a viable solution to your model, to something that's going to improve that approximation. A little long-winded, but I think
No,
that
no worries.
between the two, between the
Yeah.
two, I think, that actually puts better, it puts what Laura
So,
said, I think, into perspective.
so Caleb, it's funny because you started by saying that you agreed with Laura's statement, but what you're describing agrees more with CJ's statement. So the idea it might be an issue of the semantics of a imperfect language, in that if you're looking at because an asymptotic relationship is kind of similar to saying that you're not assuming that what you're viewing as the truth is the truth. And so that's what CJ is saying. Don't think you see the truth. Keep probing. And what I hear when somebody says the truth is the truth, what I hear is that they've decided already that they know what the truth is, and they
Oh,
reject anyone's suggestion that it could possibly be different.
Marissa,
Just
I didn't mean that, Marissa. I said
okay.
when it's truth, but it doesn't mean I didn't say, I should have said absolute truth, because they're right.
Okay, right.
There
It
was
from a
a long,
mathematical perspective, absolute truth, right?
there's a journey, long journeys. You can say you found truth, and maybe you have, but you haven't reached the end. You know, you're along the pathway. You may start with a form and another one, and you get a function, and then you get other functions, and you form composites of functions, and all kinds of things are happening along the way till there's truth in absolute. And you may never reach absolute truth. You know, you may have fallen short in your attempts, or maybe there is no absolute truth for this particular thing. But I didn't mean it in the sense, that there's just that, that there's partial truths. I have trouble sort of saying there's a partial truth, but I just like to say there are probably truths along the way to getting to the absolute truth. And that's all. I didn't mean to say that there's,
Okay. Yeah. So again, if we're looking at, you guys will find me. I continue to grab CJ's words and try to speak with his words because he's so much more eloquent than I am. And CJ is saying here, and these are not things he said to me. I'm totally pulling this from his website. There's no secret decoded well, there might be, but I'm not the holder of it. I'm currently just looking at what's on his website. And he does tell us, he says, truth can be seen as the coherence of a perspective or hypothesis with the experiences and beliefs that justify it. That is, every truth has a perspective. Such a perspective has limitations. It is informed by limited experience, limited assumptions, and limits of the methodology organizing the beliefs. Perspective shifting is the process of considering other contexts and points of view. So to me, and he says, since life is finite, we cannot consider all possible points of view, all possible assumptions, all possible hypotheses, everyone's full set of experiences, and all the possible contexts. So our truths are always limited and incomplete. And that is a wordy way of saying what Caleb said quite succinctly. And for those of you who are familiar with the mathematical term of asymptotic, it's quite eloquently depicting this paragraph that I just read here for you. So thank you both to Laura and
I
Caleb.
think actually it's a really cool thing to think of something approaching, getting closer and closer and closer, but never touching. I think
Right, it's perfect.
I think it's really a way to look at all of this. But I also
Okay.
think, like, when you talk about these things, these are very experiential based and so forth. Yet when you get into the scientific side, I think that you have all this, it's information, and it's not so experiential all the time. When you're a physicist and, you're studying, things out now.
It is experience. It may not be your experience, but it's someone's experience.
What? Well, yeah, but I don't know if you experience facts. Can you experience facts that are like in outer space? Can you really experience those facts?
Is it a fact if it's never been experienced?
I mean, nobody's really experienced like the Big Bang, but they study it.
It's not a fact. It's just a theory.
That's true. It's a theory. You're right. I have to think of some other fact. I don't know.
Again, like I said, my question to that is it a fact if you've not experienced it? Next up, I have Bob. Bob, please go ahead.
Okay. When I heard the word asymptote, that struck a something in me. When I first heard about this seminar talk today, I asked myself, how does induction work? I mean, how do we? How does that work? And I'll give you an asymptotic answer from the physical world. Let's suppose you're a child who does not know how to ride a bicycle, and they want to learn to ride a bicycle. So they get on the bicycle. And they have a helper. They take the first step and they wobble an awful lot. And if you keep going, and the child has some more training, and they take a week or a month or whatever it takes, they will asymptotically learn how to ride a bicycle, and it will go very smoothly. This is all in induction, mind you, because they're putting in experiential, they're adding little pieces of experience a bit at a time. So they learn how, so they can learn how to ride a bicycle. This is asymptotic. But there's a flaw in this, and that sometimes an asymptote can have a bump in it. And if you're you could be a professional bicycle rider, and if you hit a rock, or it can knock you off your bicycle, and your learning will not work. So I say let that be a lesson in asymptotic learning.
You. Next up, I have David. Go ahead, David.
I have to sort of unmute there. Yeah, I'm not, because we're not giving a lot of examples, not exactly sure how to raise the question. I think we're talking about our knowledge being, okay, as asymptotic, approaching, as though we don't actually know some things for sure. And there's a tradition of understanding. It's not fundamentalist like biblical, but in philosophy, in Western philosophy, that you actually can tell what's right and wrong. And you can tell things that are wrong by reasoning about them, and that you can actually be certain of some of these assertions. So some of your knowledge is not iffy. It's not vague or asymptotic. You know, unnecessary destruction of people and their comfort is not an ambiguous moral question. You can be lacking in understanding and not understand that. But if you have, you know, so a child might not even know what I'm talking about. But if you, so we can say, oh, well, you know, let a child add. So look, 1 and 1, sometimes it's 4, No, it's really not. And there's some things we know for sure because they're defined by our actual reason. So it's not correct to add this way, and it's also not correct to judge certain ways, because we have the kind of knowledge that we can not only talk about what we believe, but we can fully justify it on principles alone that are purely rational. There's no empiricism in it, no induction in it. It's pure principles. So for example, in group theory, we can make statements about finite groups having certain factoring properties. That's just absolutely true. And likewise, in certain aspects of moral behavior, there are similar aspects of thinking. Now, some cultures may not have the notion of property, so it doesn't apply. Okay. But you do have a body, and we do have notions of our own body. And I think all creatures and cultures probably do have a notion of their own body. So I think beginning at that level, that there are certain things that are not really asymptotic truths, that are absolute truths. And you have to know why you know them in order to say that you really know them. You can't just know them. Oh, it's good to be good to people. You have to actually have the grounding for that. But, we have a feeling that things that are good smell good, like the right thing to do to people, not lie, not cheat, not da, da, da. But the actual grounding of that renders them a different status than uncertain. It renders them, like group theory. It renders them as certain. So there's my, what we would call it, fundamentalist morality point of view.
So I am sadly having to disagree with you. I'm going to respectfully disagree here.
The greatest thing. That's exactly what I want. It's a perfect thing, where it's the most dignified.
So, absolute truth is a statement that is true at all times and in all places. It is something that is always true, no matter what the circumstances. It is a fact that cannot be changed.
Well, let's not mistake universal truth from I'm going to put into words something, and now the words will shift because I changed the circumstance and it means something different. See, that's...
So I'm talking about absolute truth. You said absolute truth.
That's
so
right.
When I think of absolute truth, that's what I'm hearing. And I think if you were to look it up, it would be a statement that is true at all times and in all places. When one says absolute truth, that is the implication of what one is saying, that
Right.
something is always valid, regardless of parameters or context.
That's right.
And I cannot agree with that. I would disagree.
Well,
we're on a philosophical bent here, right? If we were to add context to something and parameterize it in so much where we're talking about absolute truth only in a mathematical context, I might have an easier time agreeing with the concept of an absolute truth. But if we're talking absolute truth with no context out in the world, I think that's a very dangerous concept. Probably in the minority here, but yeah, I'm sticking to that one. I'm what do we say? Intellectual courage. Yeah, I think that the belief in an absolute truth has spawned many of the tragedies and travesties in our historical past.
So and then just a question, could it be in some way justifiable, not an absolute demand on you, that you not cause unnecessary pain and suffering to another rational creature?
That's a moral quandary. That's a moral
I don't think it's ambiguous. I'm asking you, does that seem like there's a condition under which unnecessary pain would be justifiable because it's a pleasure to you? You would do it, or someone would? Why?
Well, okay. All right. Bear with me, folks. This is going to seem foolish, but he did ask. So if I were caught somewhere unpleasant that was a potentially life-threatening situation, and there was need to distract myself from something, it could be that an unnecessary pain done to myself, like maybe digging my nails into my knee, that's unnecessary. Why on earth would I do that? But it might help. And that's a very simple, silly example almost, but it's simple, and yet it does derail that statement that unnecessary pain should be avoided at all costs, or doesn't. I'm not quite sure the verbiage you used. I'm sorry. But you see what I'm getting at? I don't think
cause unnecessary suffering to another rational being. So
And there's
you,
that too, relative.
yeah,
There's
just
the relative.
right. So you're trying to find a reason it would be reasonable to do that, right? That there would be some better, some good that would
Mhm.
justify it, right? So you're looking for something that would justify it. And yeah, so I'm not sure what that principle would be, because you're going to make
Right.
it necessary. You're going to make it necessary for something.
I
you
guess
know?
my thing is if you are looking at an absolute truth, you're looking at an inflexible reality. And and not inflexible. Inflexible is too soft a word. You're talking fixed, unalterable fact. And for most things, you would be very hard pressed to find that to be, an accurate statement. And again,
Okay.
my opinion, right? I am open to being convinced otherwise, obviously.
Okay, so
Because if
I'll
not,
I'll give you
I'm proving
let me-
myself wrong.
let me ask you something to open that frame of view up, which I like very much what you're saying. I actually do. We make decisions in our lives from moment to moment. We never have more than the information we have. We have to make these decisions. So to make a decision, we're always making a decision in a limited context, and we must apply some principle. So that principle has to be something we feel is based on the evidence, is what we feel is the full justification, our understanding of the world, and this is dictated in that. So
Wait, did we lose David? David? Oh no. Oh, he got cut off right at a pivotal moment.
oh, sorry. Okay, too bad. I'm lost. Lost as a
Okay, you're
word.
back. You're back. I hear you. You're back now.
Oh, okay. I was saying if we take what your knowledge is at a certain moment, that's an absolute condition. That will never change when you look back on that. You can say, when I made that decision, is it right or wrong? Absolutely. You only have that knowledge. We can't tell you later on, oh, the baby you saved was Hitler. Don't give me that. I saved a baby. Okay, so what you're doing
Right.
is absolutely right. Absolutely right. There was no other right.
That you perceived.
It would be totally saying the world is not the world you experience. You should be perceiving other things. That is the kind of knowledge nobody gets.
So that's fascinating. Sorry, I apologize, folks, if this seems not tangential to you guys, but I think it fits in with what we're talking about. So the idea here is that so as CJ calls it, our thoroughly refined ignorance, right? Is as a truth. Maybe, and so he says, our thoroughly refined ignorance as a truth may be one of our best tools for assessing our desires to effectively organize or design a better shape for our futures. And so I think it's a yes and kind of thing here, in that if in that moment we believed something to be the absolutely most appropriate and in fact only path forward, and then in some future date we learn that that was in fact not true, it does not mean that in that moment you didn't believe that. So it doesn't mean that it was true in one moment and not true in another. It means it was true to your perception in one moment, and then in a different moment, no longer true to your perception, because now you had different bits of information with which to perceive differently. But what doesn't change, or I guess what it is it's the problem is in our use of the word truth, because what you're asking is, if it was true in that moment, now that I have a different perspective, is it no longer true? I think that that's the wrong question, or in the wrong perspective, because what it really is it was never actually true. You perceived it as true with all of the data that you had coalesced upon a point as specific as you could with all of the data points at your disposal. When you shifted to the right and you found you had more data points, the point at which you coalesced is different than the point at which you coalesced over here. And that allowed you to come out with a different determination. And in so doing, now what you perceived to have been truth is no longer what you're perceiving to have been truth over here. Does that make sense?
I'm not seeing that as dealing with the moral question, actually.
Sorry, Julie, go ahead. Julie, were you trying to hop in? Oh, no.
No, I
Okay.
wasn't. I don't know what happened.
Okay. Jeannie, I see
Okay.
your hand up. Jeannie, please go ahead.
So I think in terms of moral truth, it absolutely is changing all the time. And hopefully it will keep changing and will keep getting better. 100 years ago, a little boy goes out and shoots 100 little birds. He comes home. His mother is absolutely proud of him. What a good shot he is. He's getting good with his gun. This is not, it doesn't make her, she's not something other than a Christian. She's a, good mother, and he's a good little boy, and these are good people. But they have done something that, in our judgment now, looking back, you shouldn't have been doing that. I mean, this is how all the passenger pigeons were lost. And so I do think, I mean, when we look back on our past, the treatment of women, the fact that people had slaves, all these other kind of moral behaviors, it doesn't mean that they were immoral at the time, but our moral, point, that we're trying to get to has changed. And I hope it keeps changing forward.
Thank you, Jeannie. That makes a lot of sense to me. It's a great way to put that out. Thank you. Well, let me see. I'm sorry, Caleb, please go ahead. Oh no, I missed Caleb. Caleb's gone? That's terrible. Oh no, I out-talked him. In my head, feel shame. All right, David, you're up.
Yeah, sorry, I got home. I could turn my computer, but it says the meeting's over, so I can't go on my computer. I'll stay on the phone. As good or bad as the connection is. Yeah. So yeah, Gina, I think that public opinions and mores are not the same as morals. So Thomas Jefferson, owned slaves, and he spent his whole life trying to get that made illegal in Virginia. He knew it was wrong. He totally knew it was wrong. It was not right. So yes, he had a failing, but the law of how you treat human beings never changed. And there's always been a problematic, even for biblical stories, about having servants. And the word slave and servant, it's the same word. And the question of whether you own them or not, it's not like American slavery. So there was a sense 3,000 years ago that you don't own people and that there's something fundamentally wrong about it. And that anyone who was taken possession of knew it was wrong. So I think there's certain things that we can say, oh, people didn't behave that way. The mores allowed it. That's not what morals, I don't think, is about. It's about the absolute rules that don't change, which is the freedom of another rational being can't be curtailed without some truly universal justification. Like there's a problem that we need to have a lockdown, or something like that. You cannot justify what is essentially free with restrictions from its freedom. So stopping people from having their own life and choices, in certain ways, there's something lurking there. that is not an iffy value. We may not behave to that, but we'll write down the words, all men are created equal, meaning all people, because that value doesn't change. And, like in Passover, we're going to celebrate liberation. And look at what freaking Israel's doing. It's crazy. But the value's right. The people are wrong. The value didn't change. People are inconvenienced by good values. And that's what we see all the time. And they'll point to a text and tell you why they're doing it for somebody's good. But you don't, for no reason, bring pain on somebody. That's just not a good. Okay, you're training your son to be strong and hard and stuff like that. What's going on there? You're bringing up something really different. So you take my words into that context and you take away my meaning. You're saying, I see a necessary context for this person to be strong because we're surrounded by hostile forces. He has to learn to suffer and not be distracted by the pain. Okay, you're doing it so that he lives. So the command to allow living things to live, that's not something that's maybe or iffy. But if you have something to contravene that is a higher value of survival, we have to talk. These things aren't rules that just come out of
Yeah, I think that you've traveled.
Yeah, interpreting them is the depth of this discussion. That's why the comprehensivism is
Right,
important.
but I'm thinking, David, that you've traveled outside the realm of discussing truth and into the realm of discussing morality.
Right. Yeah, I guess I got distracted by this be calling a moral epistemic value. It's really, the word moral shouldn't even enter here. Right. Pure knowledge, seeking knowledge is, you're right, a different issue.
Yeah, and he's quoting Polya. So Polya does say, so when he's talking about the 3 points, right? He says the first point is intellectual courage, the second is intellectual honesty, and the third is wise restraint. And we went into this in a little depth before you arrived. And the last piece that Polya says in that section is he does say intellectual courage, intellectual honesty, and wise restraint are the moral qualities of the scientists. So he says they're the moral qualities. And just my interpretation of that statement, because it was one that you're right, it's a very, very powerful statement that kind of almost punches you in the gut and forces you to sit with it for a minute. And my thinking on that is, just as someone who finds themselves to be of a Catholic bent uses something like the 10 Commandments as a guiding principle for their meaningful path in life, I think Polya is proposing that these 3 tenets be a guiding principle for scientists as they walk forward in their paths. And that's just my 2 cents. But that's what I'm thinking he's saying. I think the use of the word moral was intentionally placed there to bring up the imagery of something like the 10 Commandments. In that when one hears, even if one is not religiously bent, one hears the 10 Commandments and immediately thinks, okay, this is a guiding, because the story. Even if you don't know the story, you just hear 10 Commandments, right? It's something that you pick up, and if we are thinking beings, we don't tend to assume that everything is literal, but these 10 Commandments are a great way with which to structure our forward path. So that's kind of the way I made my peace with the use of the word moral in this case. Does anyone else want to comment on this this question of why moral qualities of the scientists is what these 3 things is being called? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe it's getting late and people are tired. Did that make sense to you, David?
Oh, yeah. I think the question limited to the epistemology is great. And I think you justified why he used the word moral, explained that well.
Awesome. I should go home. Quit while I'm ahead. Yes.
But the scientist has to realize everything else that CJ suggested, which is that what they're asserting in a context, and that it is limited. But if they understand it as the contextual result of their work, then that stands kind of in an absolute way. That can't be assailed because there can be other contexts to use. But within this context, they've done their job. So that's what Paulie is talking about, I think. And uniting perspectives opens that up. So it's good discussion.
Thank you. Yes, I think it was a great discussion. Thank you, all of you. I know that it's Pat. We're pumpkins here officially, so thank you for those of you still hanging out. I do want to say we have a new series starting on Friday, and it's on meta modernism, and the idea is combining the best of modernism and postmodernism. And so that is going to be something new we'll be exploring here at 5211 Ideas on Fridays. I think it's every other Friday starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that begins this Friday. So yeah, I invite you to check it out. And I think with that, I'm going to bid you guys a fantastic rest of your week and evening. So we'll meet again.
Thank you for the comprehensive work.
Say one more time.
Thank you for the comprehensive work you've done here.
You are most welcome. Yes. So we meet here first and third Mondays is the Comprehensivist Wednesday events where we are going through CJ's book. And we have the next one is Mystique in Learning and in Life. So that is going to be, wow, May already, guys. Next time I see you, it's going to be May 1st. And we'll be looking at Mystique. Always a fun one. Thank you, all of you, for your comments. And thank you, David. You made me think really hard today, and I love that. And Jeannie, thank you so much. Hope your voice feels better.
Good night, everyone.
Great night, guys. Good night. Bye.